Hey guys, welcome back. So in this video we're gonna see about the server-side scripting. So even before looking at what the server-side scripting is, so let's try to understand what a server is. Okay, so when you are trying to communicate in the internet, in the world of internet, so there are many three parties involved in any sort of communication that could happen on the web. So usually we have a client machine, and then you have the internet, and then you have something called a server. So let's try to see what these three components do. So talking about the client, so a client is nothing but it is a machine, or it is some entity which is going to request for some sort of resource, which is going to request for some service. So a client is basically a program which is going to request something from another system through the internet. So a client will not have a lot of things to do within the communication, right? So a client is only supposed to send a request, and when they receive that, so they might need to process a bit and then show it to the user. So this is what the client does. And then internet, so internet is nothing but the infrastructure that was already available with us. So using internet, we can send a request to any machine which is connected to the internet. So so it is nothing but it is just a collection of machines which help us to communicate to another machine, right? So these two things, so it seems like only having a client and an internet is not the main is not the main service of an internet. So the main services of the internet are provided by something called as a server. So what is server? A server is also a program. It is more or less what we have on the client side. We have almost the same things on the server side, but they are optimized for a service, right? So how are they optimized for a service? So for example, in the client side, we can say that we have a laptop. So what are the features of this laptop? It might have a CPU, and offer and it might offer some sort of a networking. It might have some sort of computation, a software which is used for doing some sort of thing. So if we were to compare, the a server is also going to have each of them, but in a much varied proportion. So a server is not supposed to be just another computing machine. It is a very advanced computing machine. So the internal architecture is different and advanced from what a client a system might possess. So as we discussed, that the client sends a request, so it's going to the a server is going to respond. So the main role is actually played by the server. So the client has a very minimal role, and so does the internet. So the a server has to be the component that is responsible for the smooth flow of this of communication through internet. Then how does this work? So usually the client in most of the machines is just a web browser. If you are searching for a web page, then the web browser is your client, and you yourself is the user. So we cannot treat the users as a client, because when it comes to the internet, everything has to be a machine. So we see the machine with a web browser which is requesting as the client, and the machine which is having all the services as the server. So the web browser is going to make a HTTP request, okay, here, and then the web server is going to process, and then it's going to give the response. So how does the web server respond? So there are actually mainly two types of responses a web server could provide. So if you were to observe the a sort of web pages that we visit, so we can see that the web pages like Wikipedia, they don't have so much of interactivity. So they only have some sort of a message, some sort of HTML content that is which is shown to us. So it is not going to provide you with any sort of interactivity. It will not fetch anything. No, it's not going to make a lot of processing about the UI it is going to present. So it is a very static website. So why am I calling it static? Because whatever the web content that we are seeing, is actually the same that which is present at the web server. So at the web server we have some sort of HTML pages, so all these pages, they will be are directly shown to the client because they're just a static HTML pages. You don't need to run any sort of scripting to make them more dynamic or something. So usually this is what the web used to look like back in 1990s. And then we came up with something called as a dynamic website. In the Instagram and the Facebook and all of these websites, they are very much into dynamic websites because it's not for every user it's gonna show some different content. It is actually uh, based on who has logged in onto the system. So based on all these different parameters, it has to show you a different content. So that means something has to be created have dynamically at some place, and it has to be delivered to you. But then who is going to make all these things? Who is going to manage that? So we do have a web server here as well, but whatever the uh, data which was supposed to be fetched, it won't just be some sort of HTML files or some very static a web content which can be shown to you easily. So we needed something called as a database to store and manage some sort of data, and then we needed an application server for the server side processing. So in this way, the web server was supposed to make sure that for to generate such kind of a web content, it is going to have the support of the database and an application server. Now let's go further and see how these web servers and application server different. So the web server and application server. So let's have a comparison. So what a server is. So a server is a general purpose software that exposes services to the clients through the internet. So a server could be anything, or it's just another machine on the internet which is capable of accepting requests and processing some sort of logic and return back some sort of result, right? So so they it uh, it can be a file server, it can be a mail server, it can be a DB server, right? So if there is a server which is managing all the her database programs, we can call it as a DB server. If it is managing all the file related systems, then we can call it as the file server. So it's just a software, so it's not specific to any protocol as well, because the file server might use FTP, the a DB server based on its configuration, it's going to work in a different way, the mail server is going to work a different way. So there is no protocol, so it's a very general purpose software which is going to deliver some sort of service. And then we got the web server. As we can see that we have named it as the web server, so we can understand that it is going to work in the web. So it can only work in the web. So here the server is not supposed to be in the web. It could just be in a internet, or it could just be a remote client as well, but the web server, it has to be accessed through the internet. You cannot access via any a network or something. So a web server is focused on delivering static web content. So as we discussed here, so this is the main purpose that we can say of a web server. It will have all this HTML, CSS pages with the static content like images and some JSON files as well. So it's going to have all these static content. It so it's not it is- so it is not required to do a lot of processing. It is only supposed to pick up uh, all those files and maybe do a little amount of processing, and then send the result back to the client. So that is what the web server is supposed to do. It is going to deliver the static content like HTML and CSS via the protocol called as HTTP. We're going to discuss about the HTTP protocol later, but so this is the protocol so that we use to access the HTML pages and everything. So this is the hypertext transfer protocol. So web servers only work with HTTP. The modern web servers might have access to. I might give you access to use some other protocols, but a web server's main purpose is to serve anything through HTTP protocol. And the examples are Nginx and Apache HTTP server. So these are the web servers. So they only focus on giving the static HTML content back to the client. And then we have something called as an application server. So the application server came into the picture when we needed this dynamic website. So okay, if this is a dynamic website, how is an application server is going to act? So application server is focused on hosting and running the dynamic web applications used for enterprise software. Enterprise software. So this is another term. So so what is the application server doing? Application server is going to have all the ecosystem, all the environment. So let us say we are trying to create some sort of Java project, right? So if you want to run that Java project, you needed a small so you need a server which will have all these Java jar libraries and the mm, GRE available with it, and maybe some other extensions. So you need an entire ecosystem to run Java, and on top of that you need all these Java files, and you need some sort of uh, methods to invoke them. So you need an entire ecosystem for running the software. So that ecosystem will be available with the application server. So application servers are also used for enterprise applications as well as the web applications. So the examples are IBM's WebSphere, Oracle WebLogic, and Glassfish. And then we come to the one that we are going to use. So these are called as web containers. So web containers are nothing but a minimalistic version of the web servers. So web containers are only supposed to be working with any a web project, not enterprise level project. It's going to work with a web project, and it works closely with the Java servlet. So the concept of a web containers came when we are needed to run the Java servlet. So we'll see what this a servlet program is, and why do we need something called as web container instead of any application servers or web servers. And the greatest example is the Apache Tomcat and Eclipse Jetty. So we'll see how these two differs. And okay, so in this picture, let me explain it. So we have the client. So some HTTP request will be given, and the web server is going to it's going to access it. So a small hard database for retrieving the files, and it is going to return back the files. So this is how it simply works. And when it comes to an application server, so we still need a web server to accept the request from the internet, and then it will be forwarded to an application server which will have all the ecosystem to process something in a language specific way. And then it will so and then it might need to interact with a lot of databases, right? So it's not a single database. So everything that the application server manages is going to be complex, which cannot be managed solely by a web server. And then the application server returns back the response to the web server, and the web server is now concerned with the delivery of the response. So this is how they differ in a way, right? And okay, now let's see how the Java servlets work. So we have the web server. So we still need a web server because the application server is not needed if you're only running something called as the a servlet. So a servlet needs some sort of application a server which we call as the web container. So a web container is going to have all the implementations which are needed to run a servlet. So all the servlet specifications are implemented by this a web container. And let's see how the servlet container internally works with the servlet. So we have the web server which is going to forward the request, and the servlet container is going to manage all the servlets. A servlet is going to have three lifecycle methods. So it's going to have a init method, a service method, a destroy method. As the name suggests, init method is going to initialize the servlet, and the destroy is going to destroy the service. But the a service method is used to do some sort of processing. And the servlet container, if there are many requests, a new servlet object is not created. Instead, we're going to create the request threads, and each of the request thread is going to execute the same service method, so that we don't create many objects of the same servlet for a similar type of request. And then so let's see how so the a servlet uh, is actually an interface. So using the servlet interface, there is another implemented class which is called as the generic servlet. So the generic servlet is going to implement these three methods, so which we discussed here. So it is going to implement the init, a service, and the destroy methods. A generic servlet is actually generic because it is not a protocol specific one, and it has a very limited features as well. So it is going to do what a basic servlet was supposed to do. And then we have the HTTP servlet, which we are going to use at the most. And the HTTP servlet is going to have every method of the generic servlet and the servlet, as well as it is going to provide you all the methods which are of HTTP webs. It is going to have methods like do get and a do post. So, and we do have a lot of methods like a do delete and do upgrade. All of these HTTP verbs are going to be converted into methods, and they will be present in the HTTP servlet. And if you were to create your own servlet program, so you have to either extend any one of them. If you're trying to extend the servlet interface as well, then you have to implement all of those methods by yourself, which are not by default, maybe known to a programmer. So we'll only extend either the generic servlet or the HTTP servlet, and this program is going to be running as we need it. So how can we write this you know this particular servlet code? Let's try to see if okay, let's see how it actually works internally. Okay, so initially the servlet will be loaded so the unloading will be managed by the web servlet. It is going to load it, and then after loading it is going to call the init method. So some sort of initialization and some initial has parameters, and some memory blocks will be assigned to it. And then here we have some sort of requests, and we are creating them as threads. So all these requests are converted into threads. And then we have either the a service method or the do get do post method. So we're going to call all these service methods, and they are going to run infinitely. And I mean, not infinitely, but in real time a servlet won't go down unless we explicitly set it down. But if we were to set it down, then we're going to call the destroy method, and we can uh, eliminate the servlet from the memory, right? And yeah, so this is the workflow of how a servlet works. So we have implemented a servlet named Hello Servlet. So this Hello Servlet is extending the HTTP servlet, and here we have overridden the doGet method. So we did write our own logic. We were just saying hello world or something. So let's see what happens when I'm hitting the URL. Okay, here I'm hitting the URL. I'm saying okay, of this application. So let's say my application name is a servlet tutorial, and of that application I'm calling this hello. We can call it as a path. Okay, or in the REST API we actually call this as a resource. So I'm actually calling this hello resource, and then I don't know what to do when I uh, have get this path. So that we have to explicitly say that whenever a such URL pattern like a slash hello is called, then you call this thing called as the hello servlet. So what is the hello servlet? So let me check in this us servlet thing. Here I can see that there is a servlet named hello servlet, and the a class which is need to be called is this org.planning.tutorial.servlet. So it's a very big name, so that's why I've used this aliases to refer to them easily. So here I can understand that. So when I get this a slash hello a URL, then I have to hit this, I have to call this hello servlet class. Okay, so after identifying the resource, I'm going to call that, and after creating an object of that, so the web container will implicitly know that it has to call either the a service or the do get or the do post methods. So it is going to call that, and after calling that, so here we are getting the output stream from the response object. So here we can see that we actually got two input parameters to us. It is the request and the response. So the request is going to encapsulate all the things which are coming from the URL from the request. So whatever happening at the client side is going to be encapsulated into an object, and it will be there with the request. And the response is everything that we want to send to that request. So the response is what we figure out at the server side, and to figure that out, we use the request object to understand the request parameters. So this is how we are going to print the okay, so we are going to print something onto the web screen, right? So this works. So now, so this is what the output looks like after executing this a servlet. So this is how we're able to generate something dynamically without statically loading. So in this entire mapping, I don't we didn't load something and just put it onto the our web browser. We have explicitly made sure that, for this URL you go to this class, and executing this class is going to give you some sort of output, and that output has to be presented onto the website. So we are creating content dynamically using the servlets. Right. Let's see how we have. So this is something called as the a directory structure. As we have seen that the web container is nothing but it is just a software program which has all the implementation of the requirements, or the specifications of a servlet. So, and one of the specification is that so we need to follow some sort of hierarchical structure, so that the web container is going to understand where certain files are going to reside. So this is how it is defined. So we need to have some called as a webinf folder. Inside the webinf folder, you have to you have to place your Java classes in this classes folder, and then if you have any external jars, you have to place it in the library. And then the web and the web.xml is actually called as the deployment a descriptor. So it is going to contain the mapping, from the URL to the servlet class. We are going to map for which URL which servlet class has to be loaded and called. And then we have the HTML. This is all the front end that we want to show. And then there might be some other directory like statics and images and all other things. So we're going to place it in this structure. So this is how the server programs work and they run. So that's all for the video, guys.